Pat, this is our last show of 2023 and has
Another
has been
year
a holiday.
flies.
Seriously, what happened to 2023? This
I
it
know,
feels like it was just yesterday was January. I don't know.
I know.
But we're not here to talk about the past. Well, we are here to talk about the past because there's nostalgia like nostalgia. Um, and in keeping with our annual kind of holiday tradition, we're going to talk about a Christmas movie. There is Christmas in the movie, but
Yeah,
it's not explicitly a holiday film up until
right.
like kind of the very end. But that counts. That counts.
Certainly does, and it's categorized online as a Christmas movie, so there you go.
Which is, I guess it makes sense, but it still feels kind of weird. I was expecting, snowfall and carolers and stuff from frame one. And it's like, oh no, this is we're gonna take our time.
You'd
Uh,
never seen this film.
no, this is the first time
How
watch for me.
crazy.
Much like much like the movie we talked about last year, there was a catalyst for this. It was the Judy Garland Christmas Show, which was a TV
Right,
special.
which I had seen
And
25 times at that point.
and how many times have you seen it since we talked about it?
Oh, well, I watched it for our podcast last year. I didn't watch it this year intentionally because of play and, what can I say? I've seen
Well,
this one probably 20 times, if not more.
whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
This was a favorite when I was a kid, so,
interesting.
yeah.
We'll get into all that, and I do want to say, folks, stick around to the very end, or you can scrub through if that is your want. But I advise sticking around for the whole conversation. But Pat mentioned a play. There's a production happening this Friday that you're not going to want to miss, and he's going to tell you
Right.
all about it towards the end of the show. But
Woo!
we are talking about 1944's "Meet Me in St. Louis," directed by Vincent Minnelli and starring future, or were they together at this point, or did they meet on this movie?
Well,
Because
they
Judy
met
Garland and
on
Vincent
this
made
movie,
Liza. They met.
yeah,
Okay.
and they started cohabitating, uh, shortly thereafter and then got married.
Wow.
It's in the trivia. It's wild, and she was boinking a lot of dudes on this one.
Uh,
She boinked the producer and her man Tom Drake, John Pruitt.
okay.
Sorry to sorry to take that, put that at the top, but you know, Judy
Well,
being Judy.
that is more trivia than I thought I would ever find out. Um, which is, it's I guess it's fitting because this is a very like sexually repressed kind of movie. So I guess like
Very much
holding it
so.
all in, it's gonna come out somehow. Um, but Pat, okay, this is the first time I'd seen it, and
Yes.
honestly, I don't know if you know this about me, but I did not like or watch musicals until I was well into adulthood, probably my mid to late 30s.
Okay.
Um, I think it was some are gonna groan when I say this, but I think it was really La La Land that put musicals on the map for me. Maybe there was something else,
Makes sense.
but I've really come to love and respect the genre. But I gotta say, I think a lot of it was growing up. I thought they were corny. I thought they were old
Right.
fashioned. I didn't
Right.
understand people breaking out into song that maybe or maybe didn't have something to do with the story. And I gotta say, Meet Me in St. Louis, as much as I appreciate what it was doing, I thought it was a very weird movie. This is the reason. This is what I imagined in my head when I thought about why I don't watch musicals as I was growing up.
Well, I one of the things that I have to say is, as a lifelong musical fan, I mean, I loved it when I was a kid. It was so funny when I never knew the gay stereotype about movies,
You
uh,
musicals?
musicals. I never knew it, until maybe I moved to Chicago and to put two and two together because the Sidetracks bar on Halsted Street in Chicago's Boys Town uh, has I believe, weekly sing along to musical numbers, which, makes sense.
That's fun.
So once I found out, I was like, well, wow, man. I guess I was grooming myself unwittingly, as the kids like to say. But yeah, so I mean, I had extensive musical album collection. I did.
Did you hang out at that bar for the sing-alongs and you're like, "Hey, wait a
I have
second."
not been to the sing along there, which
Oh,
I've heard about it for years, but I haven't been there. So maybe this is a good time of year to do that. especially with the stress of the play.
Well, I mean, the thing that struck me is, I mean, there are a couple of musical numbers in here that are very familiar to me, but I wasn't sure if they originated with this movie or if they were just kind of appropriated for it. I mean, like one of them, "Skip to My Lou," and also
Oh, that
"Have
was
Yourself a Very."
appropriate,
Okay, and "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." Did
right?
that come from this movie, or is that
That came from the movie. All the
really?
main big songs are written expressly for the movie, like the trolley song, the boy next door, uh, "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas," which is kind of wild because you're seeing the origin of that song, which has become, a pretty standard Christmas song as we go through the years. So pretty cool. How many versions of that have been done? Thousands in recorded history. So there's Judy Garland doing the first one.
And that's why while I was watching it, I thought 1944, this feels almost like an origin story for this song, but I always kind of thought that the song itself was much older. So to find out this is where it came from is very cool. And I was moved almost to tears watching that scene
Oh, it's beautiful.
where Esther, played by Judy Garland, is singing to her youngest sister, who's very upset about the family moving to New York. It was, yeah, it was a very stirring scene in a movie that really otherwise kind of tried my patience with these characters.
You have to admit though, Tootie was kind of wild. She she had this wild streak in her, and I mean for her. And spoiler alert, but I'm sure everybody's seen it. Uh, she
Maybe.
goes and destroys the family of in a symbolic move by Minnelli. She destroys the family of snow people after Garland sings the song, and she all throughout the movie she's talking about her dolls being dead, and yeah, just just a lot of the Halloween scene with her preying on old people in the neighborhood. I mean, Tootie was repressed too, but in a different way.
We will
She's
talk about we're going to talk about how the kids are not all right in this town. But I think we should set this up. It's 1903.
yes,
It's the Smith family who lives in St. Louis. They seem pretty well to do. I mean, they're not, crazy millionaires or anything. I think dad's an attorney. It sounds
yes,
like a high
he's an
powered lawyer.
attorney. So
Because he
professional class, upper middle class,
right.
big house.
Very nice house. It's four daughters, one older son, grandpa, and the housekeeper, right? And they're
Yes.
all kind of living together. Dad comes home from dinner one night and he's all in a he's lost a big case, so he just wants to soak in a bath. But all the women in the house are like, "No, you can't do that. We're eating an hour early because Rose, the oldest daughter, one of the
I would
she's
say
expect
she's the oldest.
okay, she's
Probably
expecting a
she's 22, or
okay.
20, I don't know.
Right, but
Crazy.
she's expecting a big phone call from New York because one of her suitors is calling, and why else would he be calling on this newfangled invention called the telephone, except to propose marriage? And so they want to.
Right.
There's one phone in the house, so they want to clear out the dining room so that they can have this conversation. None of that works out. Whole family ends up listening in, but she doesn't get proposed to.
Now
So this, hmm?
oh, did you notice after the sequence that, the housekeeper immediately came and put a slab of corned beef on, Rose's plate? That was like the size of a small roast. It was very weird.
Yes, but also the embarrassment slash annoyance was immediately remedied by that giant slab of roast beefs or corned beef, I think it
Corned
was.
beef, okay.
So yeah, it was there's a lesson in there somewhere. I'm not sure what it is. But so Esther, played by Judy Garland, she's like 17 maybe or 16, I don't know. She's
Senior in
younger.
high school.
Senior in high school. Okay. But when she made this movie, she was like 22, 23.
Right, yeah, easily.
Everybody,
Well,
like, she gets a crush on, John Truitt, the neighbor boy who's been living across the way for, like, 3.5 weeks or months or something. Unrequited crush, wants to make a move, but won't. He looks like he's about 28, but he's supposed to be
yeah, her
17
age.
because he says at one point, "We're not even legal yet." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
And he's always going to like football practice or polo practice or whatever they're playing those days. It's just
Yeah,
crazy.
but so anyway, dad comes home and one night and makes a big announcement. Hey, I got a huge promotion. We're moving to New York City.
Right.
Or just New York. I don't know if they said city or state at some point, but
No,
they
I
talk
think New
about it as
York
if it's the
City.
city. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this wrecks everybody because they love St. Louis. The girls are upset because the romantic prospects are fading. The youngest kids are like, "Well, where are we going to find a brand new group of reprobates to hang out and terrorize the neighborhood?" Um, but the dad's like, "My decision's final. None of you work. I'm the breadwinner, and if
Right.
you want me to be able to continue to support the family and put you kids through college, I need money."
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's
so
very and this is the main conflict, and the film is divided into 4 seasons. The season of the announcement comes in, do they go fall to spring, like all 4 seasons in 1903? I don't think they do summer,
Uh, maybe it starts I don't know if it
or
starts
maybe
off
it
in summer.
starts in summer because it's hot.
Oh, that's right, and it
St. Louis
opens with
hot.
the beer cart, like the giant bottles of beer, and like, there's 2 little kids on the back, and I couldn't quite tell if they were skimming off the barrels or something, but it wouldn't surprise me given the kids in this movie.
Yeah.
Um, but so, yeah, that's the main tension, and there's, formal dances and, unrequited love and that kinda thing, but these people I described it to my wife as, "This is like a 2-hour version of the first 20 minutes of Gone with the Wind." It's a bunch of affluent, dames and suitors, completely clueless, not a care in the world except who they're gonna date, and they're kind of awful people in a way, but there's no arc. Like, even Gone with the Wind, despite its troubled history, you can say that Scarlett O'Hara went through some stuff and came
Yeah.
out a different person at the end. At the end of this movie, spoiler alert, banner's going down at the bottom.
Yeah.
Dad essentially gets so tired. He would never admit to this, but he gets so tired of everyone like yapping in his ear about how much moving sucks that he's like, you know what? We're just going to stay here. I don't need to take the promotion. Everything's going to be fine. And he
Yeah.
plasters a smile on his face. And Esther ends up marrying John Truitt
No, they're
despite,
engaged.
okay, they're engaged, but so he still has hope because something happens in the middle of the movie involving our youngest, oh my gosh, Tootie, which I kept thinking of Tootie from Facts of Life, but that if that had happened in real life, there's no way they would have had a happily ever after. In fact, I think John Truitt would have convinced his parents to move out of that crazy neighborhood.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that in a second. Pat, you've seen this movie 20 times or so.
Yes.
Why do you keep coming back to it? What do you love about it? Because I'm
Well,
mixed.
first off, I love the music in it. I think it captures an era of the MGM musical that is long gone, and I I admit I watched the trolley song twice last night because I love that number so much. It has an iconic moment where Judy Garland says the second time she said "stop, stop, stop" goes the motor. She does the classic Judy like this, which I love. I love Judy Garland. I love movie musicals. This to me is the quintessential movie musical from MGM. Peak of their times, 1944. Still, the war's still going on, so they're giving something to war weary America to look at the better times of the early 20th century. Uh, it was based on a series of short stories in the New Yorker magazine. So I think one of the reasons it doesn't really have a plot is that they just divided these stories up in formulating the script and then tried to get one thread throughout it, which would obviously, if the family's moving to NYC, excuse me, and the anticipation of the World's Fair. So a couple of things there. I just love it. I don't know why I hadn't seen it in easily over 10 years. I can't, now I can't even remember last time I see things. So there were some things I noticed in it that I hadn't noticed before. Like I was focused on the last dance, which was really strange. They had the big Christmas dance and everybody started canceling their dates. Apparently, the greatest crisis in their world is a tux won't come back from the cleaners. So he doesn't go he doesn't put on the suit, which he wears all the other times, and just go to the dance.
Well, you
But what
can't
was
be seen
funny,
at a formal
yeah,
dance in just a suit, Pat. You got to wear the tux.
I guess. But what was funny about the dance was the dance card of losers that she had to switch with June Lockhart.
Look,
And and I said to myself, if that were me at that age, I'd be on the dance card of losers. So that was
well, first of all, it's another thing. It's kind of like the origin of "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." For me, I've always heard the cliche of like, "Oh, my dance card is full."
right.
It's one of those expressions that you never really think about until I see in this movie, oh my gosh, it's a literal, like,
Yeah.
twofold card with the names of people on it that you're supposed to dance with in order. That's so bizarre to me, and I don't know how you get on that or how it's ranked, or I kinda wanted the movie to pull over and explain the mechanics of the dance card because it's
Well,
fascinating.
I think it was just a social convention. So one woman wouldn't scandalously dance with one man for the entire night, I guess. I mean, there wasn't much morality in this, quite frankly, because all the gals were hot to hot to trot in this one. Not just Judy, the real person, but Judy as Esther was hot to trot because they were all looking for dudes, or hoping that a dude was going to ask them to marry him. I'm like, the hell, you're not even 25 yet.
Well, I mean, that's
It
that's
just tells you
pasture.
a different time and everything.
I was gonna say that's like middle age in terms of
Yeah,
1903.
yeah, it was. It really was. That's
But I
true.
gotta say, like, June Lockhart, I saw her name in the opening credits. I'm like, "Oh, Lassie's mom."
Yeah.
Um, and also, oh my gosh, not Forbidden Planet. What's the name of the show that she was on? I'm Lost in Space.
Yeah, Lost in Space. She was also on Petticoat Junction for a while. She was also Lassie's mom for a while.
Right.
So
But when
she's
she
played a
showed
lot of
up,
moms.
I don't know how old she was in Meet Me in St. Louis, but first of all, when she showed up, I was like, she's wow, she's a stunner. And
Yeah, she is.
also the way that she interacted with the other characters, I'm like, finally, there is a woman in this movie who acts like an adult. Like even the mom, okay, it's like June Lockhart's character and the maid are the only people who have a lick of sense in this whole weird movie.
Hilarious. Marjorie Main is the maid, by the way, and what's her name in it? Uh, I've got the list in front of me, but I can't find. There it is. She was Katie, the maid,
Hmm.
and Marjorie Main, of course, went on to play Ma Kettle in the Ma and Pa Kettle series. Number of movies made about them, and very popular toward the end of her career. So good on her. And
I
these
haven't
were these are the MGM players. June Lockhart was part of a big family. The patriarch was Gene Lockhart, her dad. And if you ever see the 1930, have you seen the 1938 MGM Christmas Carol?
the black and white
It's a
one?
black and white one, but it was made by MGM, very Americanized. And
No.
Gene Lockhart, plays Bob Cratchit, and June's one of the Cratchit daughters in it. So I believe that was her debut. And then, of course, she just went on to do bit parts and character parts in MGM lore. It's part
I
of the
don't
studio system. She was signed up with them. So.
wow.
And
Um,
the thing about June Lockhart, this quick story. I met her at an autograph show once. So I
really?
was doing my usual interview stuff, and I asked her, since she'd play a lot of moms on TV, if it had caused any problems in her real family because her image as a mom in TV versus reality, of course. And she said, "That's the stupidest question I've ever heard," and then proceeded to answer it. Because she said her daughter, she had a hard time with her daughter when she was an adolescent, as a lot of people do, because of her image on TV versus who she was at home. Probably a chain
Wow.
smoking dame.
I would see anything to watch a miniseries of the June Lockhart story.
Oh, it'd
That
be interesting, I think. But one of the things that the dad said early, he said, well, I want to be a shortstop for the Baltimore Orioles, or I should be a shortstop for the Baltimore Orioles. And I thought, the Baltimore Orioles, they weren't a professional team back then. So I looked it up. They formed in the Eastern League in 1903. Only a baseball obsessive would know that in 1903. What was he getting, like the baseball digest every week, and he read about the Baltimore Orioles? It was such a weird reference.
He along with Biff Tannen stole the sports almanac.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Yeah, I believe it.
But
And
no,
also, go ahead.
I was gonna say that actor was Leon Ames,
Yes.
playing Alonzo Smith. First of all, I thought he looked an awful lot like Jon Stewart in a mustache, but I loved his character because he just
Yeah.
did that put upon, like,
Right.
I've had a tough day, I want to come home, I love my family, but they're just driving me up a wall. But and there's a great sensitive moment between he and his wife where they're
Yeah.
kind of doing a duet, and you see the
Yeah.
kids
Beautiful.
coming downstairs,
Yeah.
kind of like watching from the corner, like, oh, mom and dad are still in love. That's cute.
Well,
Um,
it gave it a sense of their family too. This is how they work things out. Even though there's a crisis, we're still here. We're still having cake that looks like it came from a bakery, and and ice cream. I think
um,
they were the slaves to the kids. The parents were the slaves.
oh,
Well, not
that is
dad, just mom and Katie. They had to make sure the table was out, that sort of thing.
no, dad was also a slave to the kids too, as evidenced by his decision at the end of the
Yes,
movie.
yes.
But let's talk about specifically Tootie and what's going on in that neighborhood. It's like something out of Children of the Corn meets The Little Rascals meets like A Clockwork Orange. Um, it's Halloween. The two daughters get dressed up in these kind of like scary hobo outfits, and they go outside. And in the middle of the street is a giant bonfire
Yeah,
full of junk and toys, and there's all these kids.
unsupervised.
There's these kids throwing stuff into the fire, like talking
Ew.
about how they're going around murdering people and killing people, and it's just it's a Halloween prank. But the language, I'm not a prude or anything, but it's shocking. Like, what is going on here?
Well, also too, there was a theme to the costumes. It was cross-dressing. If you notice, the boys were all in girls' outfits or women's outfits, and the gals were all guys. I'm like, who the hell came up with that in 1903?
I didn't pick up on that.
Oh, I did. I was
Well, you've seen
really
it.
micro looking at the film this time.
I know you've seen it 20 times. So
Yes.
I think I was so horrified by I couldn't take my eyes off the bonfire and talking about killing people. I'm like, wait, is this going to take a really strange turn? And it kind of did, because all right, so Tootie goes off on her own because the bigger kids go off to kill a bunch of other adults.
By
She's kind of
throwing
left.
flour in their face.
Right. So she's kind of left by the fire. I think the older sister said, stay here, don't get too close to the fire. That's a great sibling responsibility. Tootie goes off, she rings the doorbell of this couple who the guy's reading a newspaper, and the wife, I guess, is just sitting, like, staring off into space.
It was very
Like,
weird.
maybe there's a radio on that I just couldn't hear, but
Well,
it was
he's
very
the
strange.
mean old guy of the neighborhood. They have rumors that he kills cats and everything.
But is he, or is he just a guy that the kids have made up in
They
his head to
every
be the villain?
Didn't every neighborhood have that sort of, person there that you just didn't want to approach because they were either much older than your parents or et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we
No,
did. I don't know if
my
you did.
neighborhood didn't have that, Pat, but
But
as
you
they
grew up in
say,
the 90s. That's when the helicopter stuff started. So
yeah.
we were free to roam in the 60s. Free to roam.
Hey, I grew up in the 80s. I'm not that young. But no, there's a saying that I love. It's like, if everybody's awful, then maybe it's you who's the awful person.
Yeah.
That was the joke I was trying to make. We didn't have those people in my neighborhood, so it probably meant it was me. But so yeah, guy
Well,
gets the doorbell rung. He opens it up, and little Tootie is there looking up at him, and it takes her a little while to like throw the flower at him.
right.
But he takes it, and then she runs off. But my question is, this can't be a new tradition. Because if there's a giant fire set up in the middle of this neighborhood, I figure the cops or the fire department, especially if there's no adults around.
Well,
So the adults in the neighborhood have to know this is coming. Why the hell do you open the door on Halloween if there's no sense of trick or treating, but just like getting flour in the face?
again, if it was a tradition of generations, then they expected it, I guess. But
It-
also, Halloween's a Devil's Night. It's the eve of All Saints Day, and traditionally called the Devil's Night. So in those days, yeah, let's build a big bonfire unsupervised with toddlers. That's great. Um,
Maybe if you're worshiping Moloch, but I mean, this is
ah,
St. Louis in 1903.
yeah.
But
Another thing about that whole sequence is when I was a kid, I just hated it because it was so long. It's so freaking long. Uh, there were two parts I didn't like in the initial part of the film: the Halloween sequence and the Boy Next Door number. Now I love the Boy Next Door number, but back then it was like, oh, I can't stand this dreary song. And it went on and on, and then she has the thing where he comes in and it's a lamplighter and turns up all the gas lights. So it's just it was interesting to see it from that perspective because I said, oh man, I knew I was checking out at this point, before the first commercial when she sang the Boy Next Door. So and I
well,
loved I loved Tootie and hers number at the party, where they
yeah.
entertained each other.
Yeah, I mean, there are some sweet moments in this movie, but I don't know. There's just something like there's like one or two or maybe even three numbers at the early party where everyone's just like hanging out. I mean, it's cool to see folks in these fancy dresses like on the porch, gathering outside. Like it's a big to do, but on the inside, I'm like, this is why big screen TVs and beer really, I think, made a positive cultural impact because otherwise, just sitting around singing show tunes. Um,
Well, also,
however,
and you got to put it in context with
yes.
the war-weary nation wants to look back on what they perceive was the early century, which nothing is as it's perceived, especially in fiction. And
Oh,
how about Grandpa? He's the weirdest character in the whole damn film. First, he's wearing a Masonic fez in the beginning. You don't know what rituals he's going through. He references his time in China, so I'm thinking opium den. When he dances with Judy Garland behind the Christmas tree and she comes out with John Pruitt, but you could infer that he becomes younger in a fantasy sequence and she's now you know, dancing with her grandpa. And I said that was the effects of the opium, his opium 10 years. Grandpa just creeps me out in this film. I just don't know why.
well, now he creeps me out. I hadn't really thought about those things. I forgot about the whole Fez deal because they kind of make a,
Yeah.
a deal about like following him into that room and he puts it on, he's looking at himself. But okay, I want to stay on Tootie because she is the reason that I can't get behind Esther and John's, happy ending.
Right.
Shortly after I think the Halloween festivities, uh, it's nighttime. You hear Tootie screaming, and then everyone's all in a tizzy, like, "Where is she?" I something happened with the train car or the
Horrible.
streetcar.
That's a
Uh,
long sequence too. Go
it
ahead.
is, but she gets carried into the house. She's got like a bloody lip. She's like a limp rag doll. Her clothes are all messed up. And initially, her story to everybody is that John Truitt hit her with, I guess, his car. And
I thought it had something to do with
or
the trolley, like she was running. I can't remember.
Well, no, that's the real story. Uh, so
Oh,
so what happened was, her cover story was that John Truitt hit her. I can't remember if he ran her over, if he like abused her or something like that. That was the story. And so Esther freaks out, rightfully so, runs out of the house, finds John Truitt sitting on the porch, like just having a pipe where she starts like yelling at him and smacking him over the head and like
eat some
basically
until pulp.
yeah, it's a full-on assault. And he's like, "What the hell?" And then she just runs away. She goes back to the house, and Tootie is like, actually what happened was me and my older sister, we stuffed a dress full of like pillows
Oh,
and straw or whatever to make it look like a body. And then we shoved it on the tracks in front of the streetcar. We derailed the streetcar. John Truitt found us, ushered us into this secret location to keep the cops away from us. But then I don't know why, but they freaked out and then they ran home. And at some point during this whole melee, Tootie got a
well,
bloody lip,
you
right?
paid attention much more than I did during that sequence. I may have stepped out for a smoke myself when that sequence came out.
All 20 times? No,
No, I didn't remember that at all. I went again. Some of the parts I have to admit I'm half paying attention to because I've seen them. I thought, I've
oh,
seen
sure.
it so many times. So I'm like, oh, here's a sequence where she's
Yeah.
injured and it causes conflict, blah blah blah.
Yeah, I'm just giving you a hard time, pal. I
No,
love you.
no, no, it's fine. It's fine.
But
I'm seeing it differently every time I watch it. So, next time I'll pay attention to her injury. So,
but the whole point is she makes up this horrible story and it's in line with her character because even besides the influence of the other street kids or kids hang out in the street with the bonfire and stuff, she's always talking about killing people. And at one point, I think one of her first lines of dialogue is talking about how there's a lady that she wants, literally, she says, I want to kill her in her sleep and then take her body and have it dragged between two horses. I'm like, this is 1944. But then there was this big lie that she perpetrates that got this guy, heavily beaten up. I'm like, this kid needs to be in an institution. But also, when John Truitt figures out what's going on, like there's no apology to him. And he still decides, yeah, this psycho lady that I've known for all of 2 days comes over and beats me up and doesn't even really explain what happened. Yeah, let's get engaged. Like the end where he's like, oh, I'm going to marry you at the Christmas party. That makes no sense except for a Hollywood kind of fairy tale to, as you mentioned, lighten up the mood of a war-torn nation.
well, also, basically when she beats him up, that's when he first notices her fiery spirit, and in essence, I guess, falls in love with her. There was some time that went from when they first moved in, because if it starts in summer, suddenly we're at Halloween. So there's been 4 or 5 months at least. I don't think he's courting her though until this incident occurs,
Yeah.
and suddenly he's interested because maybe he's into bondage or something or leather. I don't know.
Right, but that's the point. Is like, so we're looking at probably early November because this early to mid November because this is after the Halloween sequence, and the
Oh,
Christmas
right,
party
right,
happens at Christmas because the whole thing is they're going to move right after New Year's to New York. So it's very quick between, hey, uh,
right.
17-year-old girl, and I'm somehow also your age, even though I'm probably a decade difference in real life. Uh, I know you beat me up. I know your family's kind of crazy, and you've got a psychopath for a younger sister, but yeah, I want to marry into this family. I love you.
Give me my huge slab of corned beef.
Wouldn't that be
So
her line? No, anyway,
he does say this is funny, and I thought I had to write it down. But he goes, "Yes, darn it, excuse the expression." Ooh, woo. So
there's
that's
another
like
one.
I can see somebody in 1944 going, "Oh, those are the good old days when darn it was a tough expression."
Well, he also says during their first encounter, says that Welch rabbit was ginger peachy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh
So
man.
let's talk a little about the iconic numbers, the trolley song. That's probably in movie history. I have to say that's one of the greatest musical sequences ever filmed, only because it's so simple and it's driven by the talent, of course, of Miss Garland. So it it uh, it really resonates with me for something. There's something exciting about that song, not because of the words or the lyrics, but the staging of it and the way that the sequence plays out, which I believe is done in one shot. And I did read that she did it in one take. So
Whoa.
yeah, so it's just one of those, if they do a retrospect or anything, and I see that song in the retrospect, I'm like, yes, that the reason that's there is because of the way that Minnelli did it. And Minnelli had a loving kind of camera toward this family. You know, everything was perfectly shot and staged. He was an old set designer back in Chicago here, in
Oh,
the theater. So he made sure that everything on that set was 1903 authentic. And later, Mary Astor, who played the mother, she said that she said they couldn't find anything on the set that was anachronistic, except for the way that the women wore their hair, because apparently in the Victorian era, that the early 1900s, once you're out of pigtails, you put your hair up, and that signaled that you're ready to breed, I guess. So there you go. So yeah,
um,
it was interesting the care that he took, and I think the care that he took also made the atmosphere so gauzy and nostalgic, to use a word. And it's a
yeah,
nostalgic film, let's face it.
it is, and I can again, context is key because I could see the 1940s like, yeah, let's harken back to 40 years ago.
Right.
I mean, we're
When there was
looking
no war, you know, just
right now. We're looking at a movie that's all it's going to be 80 years old
you know, next
next
year.
year.
Yeah.
But you know, if we wanted to make a nostalgic piece of art now, and there certainly have been, a lot of it goes back to the 1980s, which was 40 years in the past. It's
There
just
you go.
very, very different times. I
Right.
wonder if someone 80 years from now is going to look at movies being made now about the 1980s and be like, "Oh, they were so brutal, and what was going on?"
I
And Walkmans, what?
I brought up this topic the other day, when, we did this film on there's no nostalgia like nostalgia, American Graffiti, and I
Hmm.
think I made this point when we did this. He was looking back at 10 years before, but so much had happened from 62 to 72 that it did seem like another time, another era, you know? I
I
mean,
always thought that was the 1950s when I before I watched it, and even while I was watching, I'm like, "Oh, it's the 50s." Like, no, it's the early 60s. Wild.
right. And well, they always said that when JFK was assassinated, that was the end of the 1950s. That was the end of innocence.
Yeah.
So, uh, you know, just is there another, if you go like, if you made, let's say you made something pre COVID in 2019, you're looking back at 2009. Is there going to be any difference except for maybe social media or something, you know, or
Right.
drum selection? Okay, well, but I'm just saying, let's say, okay, let's do 2015, 2005. Not much to look back on there, you know. I don't know
Right.
if it's just it that graffiti thing always haunts me for some reason. But you're right. If we're looking back 40 years now, we're in the 80s, and yeah, a little more innocent. There's no, you know, there's no digital stuff, but you know, yeah, I knew people in the 80s who were very much retrobates, and the family was breaking down, and helicopter parents, and all that stuff. So
Yeah, I need to watch this movie again at some point, and I
ah,
can because when I went to rent it on Amazon, I I don't know if this is because I've got credits or something, or if it's just a holiday discount, but I discovered that it was only $2 more to buy it than to rent it. So I'm like,
very good.
I'll buy it. I'm
Yeah.
not crazy about this movie, but I like enough about it that I feel like, yeah, at some point down the line, I'll revisit it. And knowing what it's all about, how it all ends up, maybe I'll be a little kinder to it. Maybe not. 2D still
Well,
creeps me the hell out.
Minnelli, Vincent Minnelli, called it a Christmas movie because of the end of it being set at Christmas, and he premiered it on November 22nd, 1944. So another 11/22 reference, like JFK. But yeah, it stunned me when I was looking up the premiere date. I was like, oh my god, that was 80 years ago. Movies are now like a long time ago. I wanted to bring up. I read this other piece of trivia that I thought was really interesting. Margaret O'Brien, who played Tootie, who was a little, she was the Moppet of MGM. She was always in these movies where she played the precocious little girl until she wasn't. But her mother held out for a larger salary for Meet Me in St. Louis. And MGM immediately said, well, screw that. We'll just find another Moppet. So they found Sharon McMantis. So they fit her all in Tootie's costume. So costumes that Margaret O'Brien are wearing were made for Sharon McManus, but they finally capitulated because they knew they had to have her for the film. So get this, McManus' father was an MGM production assistant, like did lights or electrics or whatever. He tried to kill Tootie with a light. He threw it down on the soundstage and it missed her. And they, and wouldn't you think, okay, he's going to go into the clink? No, they sent him to a mental institution. So talk about the reality that's within this uh, kind of, and then of
Oh,
course the affairs that Judy Garland has with
well, yeah.
producer
I
Joe
mean,
Mankiewicz, Tom Drake, her co-star, and finally Vincent Minnelli. Third.
so I guess it could be MEAT, me in St. Louis.
Ah,
Anyway, I that's fascinating. Now I want to see a movie about the making of this movie because that's all wild. But Pat, speaking of coming to the end, we're
ah,
at the end of this
wow,
show,
fast.
and I know it flew by. On Santa's sleigh. Tell us
It flew
about
by like the seasons in BB in St. Louis.
pretty much. I honestly didn't notice that much because was there any? There had to have been snow in this movie. I just didn't catch
Yeah,
it.
it
Probably
was
because
at
they're
the
toward the
end,
end.
and
Yeah.
these plaster Paris snowmen, when she was beating them, they were breaking like they were.
That's right. I thought,
It
what
was
did they
very
make these
weird.
out of? Yeah.
The
Um,
snow people were weird. And the whole sequence where she goes crazy with the baseball bat. Tootie was Tootie would talk about repression. I think she's either a future suffragette or she's a future Lizzie Borden. We'll see if they
she's
ever make the
definitely
sequel.
she's definitely a Stephen King character
Yeah,
waiting to
yeah,
happen.
yeah, she is a Stephen. That's perfect.
But no, real quick before I get to your
Yes,
thing, I
yeah,
just you called to mind something because I think we talked about this last year because this debuted on 11/22/44, right?
right.
And then the Judy Garland Christmas special was 11/22 or like
No,
63 or was it around the same time? Because it
yeah,
was
they filmed the special less than exactly 2 weeks after Kennedy was shot.
okay. All
So
right.
yeah,
So
it was associated, and you gave this fact that I told everybody in the play that CBS would not let Garland go to the funeral even though she and JFK were friends. So
yeah.
we do make reference in the play to that. I mean, it is hanging over the circumstance. And it's pretty kind of it's the way that the playwright weaved it in was pretty cool. So all right.
What play are you referring to, Pat?
Ah, yes, let me talk. For the second year in a row, I am participating as an actor in a Christmas play called A Judy Christmas. This is produced by our comedy group, Famous in the Future, and our shows will be December 15th, 16th, and 17th, which is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. On the Friday and Saturday shows, we begin at 8 p.m., so those are the party shows. And we're doing a matinee, God help us, on Sunday at 2 p.m. So the Den Theater is located at 1331 North Milwaukee in the Great Wicker Park neighborhood. And tickets are available at thedentheater.com or by calling 773-697-3830. If you could put that you could put
Oh,
that underneath in
all of
the.
it's gonna be in the
All
description.
right,
Don't
great.
worry. Yeah.
But we're like I said, we're about 60% sold out right now, so tickets are going fast. We got a week till opening, few days before opening night, and what can I tell you? It's a entertainment sensation. We've modified the play quite a bit. We added a character on the production staff. I play the director of the TV show. I now have an assistant, and he's very funny. And the whole thing is just a laugh riot. So come on out and see a Judy Christmas.
And this is so there's an extra character. So it's evolved since last year. It's
Yes,
kind of
yeah,
changing
it's
things up. That's cool.
Desiree Burkham, our playwright, she added the character and has modified. She even added a new song too. So it's a different show from last year, but the same because the plot's still the same and the structure's still the same, but a little tweaking, a little modifying. And this year also in rehearsal process, obviously we weren't taking it from zero to completion, which last year, as I've said to a number of people, number one, do not do a play in fourth quarter. Number two, Number two, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life as far as performance was concerned, because it was literally a slog to get to that stage. But interestingly enough, we had our final dress rehearsal last year on the night of our critics banquet,
Hmm.
and after the dress rehearsal, I said, we've got it. We've got a show. I can't. But it took all the way up to our final dress rehearsal to say this is going to work. And I was literally walking on air that night. And as you recall, it was a horrible, horrible, rainy, cold night. But I didn't even. A smile was my umbrella that night. I was walking through. I didn't even notice. I had to get my
Oh,
shoes polished for the show because the shoes I was wearing, frickin', they were ruined by the time I got to the, because I was wearing them in rehearsal and, whatever. But yeah, this year, much easier process, obviously. We're just tweaking. We know our characters. It still was a horrible. I'm not good at memorizing lines. I'm trying to find that technique so I can get it quick, but it hasn't happened for me. So I think
well,
it's
you've
my
got,
old age too, so.
hey, none of that talk, sir.
We
Um, but you've got a handful of shows to get your technique down and make
Yes.
it even stronger for next year. So,
I'm looking
um,
forward to it. I really am. I think it's going to be a real gangbusters show. And the Den Theater is one of the great places in Wicker Park. You know, parking's horrible, but you know, hey, my brother, here's what he did. He went to a restaurant, he valet parked, then took an Uber to the theater and an Uber back to the car. Well, brilliant. So
there you
there's a
go.
tip. There's a tip for you if you don't want to park in Milwaukee, which is horrible. So.
All right. Well, congratulations, Pat.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Time again is my enemy. So, but yeah,
Time's the
folks,
time.
go definitely check it out. All the information is going to be below. Pat, thank you again for indulging me in one of my favorite Christmas traditions. I look forward to 2024 because that's going to be we're going to be talking next
Yes.
on the show. I mean, we're going to see each other before then.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a brand new year coming up. We got to figure out
Yeah.
a whole new slew
Got
of
some
shows, and it's going to
anniversaries
be
coming up
awesome. Yeah.
for various '04 stuff.
Oh my
But
gosh.
yeah, I know.
Oh, we're there already.
But
All right.
yeah. But also too, I love this tradition too. I remember we met at a coffee shop in my neighborhood, those many years before COVID ago, and we've been doing it ever since. And I really appreciate it. And Merry Christmas to everybody out there, or whatever you celebrate. I'm good with it.
Well, I'll wish you a Merry Christmas as well, Pat. Many holiday blessings, and I love you, man. I'll
Love you
catch
too,
you
baby.
next month. All right. Take care.